This week, there were two great pieces of content from top creators on how they use AI to create content, one for writing and one for art, or one for images. But what's interesting is that both follow a very similar process and that there's a structure to how they actually get to the ideal output. First, we'll start with Dan Koh, who was on Greg Eisenberg's podcast, and he's talking about how he works backwards from the final outcome, that he starts with the final result, his idea of what good looks like, and never with a blank page. So he's always got a bank of ideas that he can work with, and then reverse engineer the path to how to actually get there with his own ideas. So he starts with a proven idea and then expands it across his channels. Rory Flynn was on the Marketing Against the Grain podcast, and he's talking about how he starts with a proven visual and then reconstructs all the variables to reproduce it. So what's helpful for him in creating the images is that he has a simple prompt formula, and it's very modular, that there are all these different elements that he puts together to ultimately create the final prompt, which creates the AI image. So both Dan and Rory are focusing on the ideal output and starting there and not necessarily the inspiration or the input. What's also interesting to know is that they're deconstructing their creativity based on these distinct variables. For Rory, for example, it is this prompt formula, and Dan uses different ideas, different frameworks, different ways to position an idea, and those become the variables that he's using in his prompt for his writing. So that was an interesting takeaway in putting a prompt together based on very small variables, then combining them together. There's a lot more control that you have there. If the output isn't ideal, then you can tweak based on what you're looking for, whether it's writing and you want a different hook, or if it's an image and you want a different color or saturation. Both Rory and Dan do a great job of maintaining their own voice or their own personality in their output. So they're using AI as a force multiplier and not necessarily as their crutch. So it's not like they're just taking the first output, but they're tweaking it, they're revising it, then they're using the human in the loop and adding their own touch to it. And this gets better over time with repetition, with scale, with combining these things so that it's both taste and judgment that are in the output, and it's not just an AI output that anybody could create themselves. So more specifically, Dan, with his writing, would use AI to do the research, to distill long YouTube videos into the main takeaways, then add his own spin on it or his own take. Or Rory would use AI to automate the production of images once he had the exact prompt and once he knows what he's looking for in the output, then he creates the variations with AI. Both were very transparent about what they're using, their prompts, their systems in using AI to create. And it really does shed a light on how one person can scale and create a whole creative department with the right systems.